Actually JFDM.
Actually, JFDM here. It might have been just yesterday that Matt Colville did his third installment in the Brainstorming adventure, so I got a lot of nice new material to add into this. I was, sort of just jumping off and going on my own, and there's some things that I'm kind of continuing with what I was doing, and other things that I hadn't thought about yet that I'm now taking. In addition to taking basically the whole adventure. It was amazing to see that stream came on. Thank you, Matt. He commented on one of my previous videos in the series, and he even mentioned in the stream that someone was already running it, and I believe he was talking about me. So that was cool. My 5 minutes of fame there. It was amazing. Anyway, so we just had our fourth session of Draw Steel. It was another good one. It's not failing to impress, and it's not failing to be fun. That is what I'm enjoying about it most so far. So when last we left our heroes, they defeated a band of shadow elves. Conrad, the revenant shadow, experimented with the dagger and liquid that he found on these bodies to cut the shadow of a tree, and then with that he got a glimpse into another realm, Equinox, spoiler alert, and saw some human prisoners being led by a shadow elf, some other shadowy figures patrolling this line and guarding. After that, they made their way into the town of Broads proper. After doing some more scouting, Conrad returned to the group. They all came into town, and they were attacked by shadows. So when we started this session, they were in the process of basically mopping up that battle. I toyed with the idea of using the cinematic ending because it was basically in that range, but they mopped it up quick anyway, so we just sort of let it happen. They accumulated another victory. Now they were up to 5. Once they finished that fight, they started to hear the sound of an infant crying. So naturally, they checked it out, and they found a house that had a baby in it, in a bassinet, crying, and they noticed a small girl, about 8 years old, doing a very poor job of hiding in hide and seek. She was a little wary of them, especially because they're a bit of a weird party: a revenant, a time raider, and a devil. The 2 polders were a little more endearing and kind of led the conversation here with the young child. They gave her some food. She was very adamant about the fact that she was not supposed to be eating cherries because her mom, she got really sick when she ate some a few years back, so her mom always told her that she can't have cherries. But the only thing in the house left at this point was cherries. And the story that she told was that they ran out of cherries, so her mom and dad went to go find more, and they never came back. And that people in the town, they were leaving in droves. But it had been many days now, and she had been doing her best she could by her baby brother, and luckily, being a roughly 8-year-old girl, she had learned some things from mom, and when it came to babysitting and feeding the child and things like that. So things were going okay, but it was sort of at this tipping point, and this is where the heroes come into it. She, kind of confesses that she stole a few things from the general store, but no one was there. She took a few things from the neighbor's house, including the cherries that were in the house now, because she was hoping that by breaking the cherries in, her parents would come back, and when they came back, they'd be happy because the cherries they liked so much were there. For the uninitiated, the backstory on these cherries is they are the fruit that looks a lot like a cherry. It's a similar stone fruit, but is a slightly different color, that comes from a tree in the forest that is the portal into Equinox. And so what the cherries do is, as people eat them, they want more of them. They know who hasn't had the cherries. They try to convince them to eat the cherries. They don't get violent about it. They just are insistent. And once they run out of cherries, they sort of become consumed with the need to go to this tree. So that's what happened to these townspeople. They made their way to the tree. That's what happened to the parents too. They made their way to the tree looking for more cherries. Luckily, the heroes, did right by these kids. They pulled out their rations. They let her eat. They mushed up some for the baby, who I narrated as a 1.5-year-old. So he could eat some solid food, and he'd walk a bit. So he wasn't like a full-on newborn or anything. Get them set up for hopefully not too much longer, and say they'll be back, and to just stay here, they barricade the doors and stuff, try and keep these kids safe. It took me a few attempts at mentioning the fact that there's this bowl of cherries and talking about the cherries for them to really latch on to the idea that, oh, the cherries have something to do with it. They did sort of pick up on it, and eventually they started making their way to the forest. The reason they decided to go to the forest is, one, because they saw a lot of tracks leading that way, and a whole town's worth of tracks, basically. It's not hard to pick up on. But also, they noticed a pair of humanoid figures meandering lazily toward the forest, a good ways off. So they have horses. A bunch of them hop on the horses. The shadow gets up onto the roof and starts teleporting and running towards them, and it's observing them. And he sees that they're basically just giggling. They're just giggling and lackadaisically meandering their way towards the tree line. Over the table, if you will. These are two people that have eaten the cherries and are now feeling that compulsion to go towards the tree. And they're just sort of these dreamy thralls. The players follow this couple. As they get closer, they see that it's two humans, a man and a woman. They're just kind of giggling and going. The way I narrated it, it was like one of those really annoying missions in video games where you have to escort someone, but they move way too slow. So no matter what you do, you just can't go slow enough to stay behind them. It takes effort to follow them as opposed to catch up to them. When they were first approaching them, they tried the loud whistle to get their attention. They tried shouting at them to get their attention, but they were far off, and these people just ignored them. If they had walked up to them and stood in front of them and said something directly to them, they would have gotten some pretty bleary responses and probably some questions about, do you have any cherries? Oh, you should have some, that type of thing. Eventually, they come to a point where they hear sounds of wings, and these fairies approach this couple and just say, come, 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 and grab them, start pulling them along, and their pace really picks up as these fairies drag them along. So the shadow was staying very quiet, teleporting and following. The rest of the group is sort of just kind of moving along at a more hurried pace now, and they get a little further in, and then here come more fairies and start doing the same to them. Come, come, come. So they all end up in this clearing where this big table is set with just a bunch of food, and the shadow gets there first, and he's looking at it. These fairies are talking to him. A couple goes to sit and eat, and they're just eating, and the fairies are like, eat, come, you can be the one we serve. We can serve you. You'll be way better than our previous masters. They're just talking and saying nonsensical things. As this continues, and they're bringing over cups and bringing over the bowls and trying to get him to eat, and he's refusing outright, and he's seeing that everything they're bringing him is basically different preparations of cherry, and he doesn't want any part of this. The rest of the group comes up, and they're the same way, and so they're having this conversation with the fairies. They're hearing that, the shadow elves were their masters. They don't want to serve them anymore. They're just mean, bad masters. You guys would be so much better. You be our overlords. Be everything to us. You could be our everything, and we'd be great with that. But they are very wary, wisely so. Until eventually another fairy comes up and lands on the shoulder of Conrad, who's by far the most abusive to these fairies. Yeah, you're right. All of these fairies are crazy. They're out of their minds. Let's leave. You don't want to talk to them. They're just gonna keep doing the same thing. They're not gonna progress this conversation at all. The group does leave. They leave with this fairy who I named Zarian Moonwhisper, and he's talking to him and kind of giving them a bit of the rundown. A lot of activity in the forest lately, a lot of people coming through. They all go to this tree. They just sort of dive into it, and then they're gone. The group asks him to bring them to the tree. He does so, and they see this tree, which, content warning, I described as having a few human corpses effectively nailed to it. And this is sort of playing into my own particular oddities that in the way I'm running this, in that humans are so intrinsically tied to this material plane that they are, effectively of the plane, and it takes their essence, whether it's their blood, their flesh, their soul, spoiler alert for later, in order to blend this plane with another, or create this portal, as the Shadow Elves did, to create a portal between the material and Equinox. You've got these 3 human corpses now nailed up to the tree, and then on the other side of the portal there is more happening, which we will come to in a later episode. The group approaches the tree and it lashes out at them because the tree is kind of like the tree in Sunless Citadel. It is alive and it is ready to fight. They battle against the tree, and it was a pretty gnarly fight over the course of 2 full rounds. The group was on like the last little bits of hit points when they destroyed this thing, and it sort of flopped over like a popped balloon, revealing this portal, which they definitely could tell that they only had a certain amount of time. And one of the players said, all right, so we got to get in, get the prisoners, and get out. And he was absolutely right. Also because I knew that they would need this for the final fight. Maybe this is me being, a softie, but they were very low on recoveries. They were very low on hit points. And part of me feared a little bit that if they didn't get something, they weren't gonna go in the portal. They would feel like they couldn't. It sounded like they were gonna do it anyway. But I didn't, I wanted to make sure that their heroism would shine. When the tree died, the forest started to feel a little more right again. They felt a little revitalization from the forest for sort of righting it. So they got a free recovery as a reward for the fight, in addition to the victory. And also that one fairy that they had been, chatting with and seemed sane, he flew over with these 3 apples in his arms and said, you guys look like you could use this. You look a little beat up. And so those effectively functioned as 3 healing potions. They're basically out of recoveries. I don't even know if they're all full hit points. I don't think they are. And they're about to go through this portal next session where they're going to end up in an enemy. I'm calling it a factory. It's the place where these prisoners are kept. And this is something I'm getting from the 3rd adventure creation stream. These people's souls are being used to make black arrows, which if you ever watched Dusk, which Matt Colville ran as 4th edition D&D. It was a really interesting and good campaign, which I think all the VODs are on their channel. You should definitely go watch it. These black arrows could basically pull people into Equinox, pull people into Dusk. This is where those arrows come from. So I liked the idea. They have these shadow dwarves, which I'm going to call Tenebril Dwarves. There's one shadow elf left that is running this operation, and the Tenebril Dwarves are sort of working the operation. And they are being taught smithing by a high elf prisoner. And this high elf prisoner was given by Ajax's people, because I'm going to sort of connect Ajax, because of one of the players' backstories, with this sort of Crack the Sun storyline, the attempt to free Cythrion, or Euron is here, from its prison within the sun. And this is all long-term stuff. Like, I'm only running this through 1st echelon. That is my goal for this. And by the time I'm done with this, there might be some break, but later this year, the books properly will come out and I'll have the physical copies. And at that point, I'll be able to run the later echelons a little more effectively. But I want to be able to end this whole, 1st echelon with a satisfying end, but also have some threads for later, which maybe this group will see, maybe we won't. I hope to run it with them. This high elf smith who knows how to work things like Rovian, I believe is the name of it, the sun metal, the star metal, also helping with this soul forging. So in this game, that tree that the players just beat is called the Soulforge tree. And they are going to enter a place called the Soulforge, because this is where the souls of these humans are forged into the black arrows, and that is what they are going to have to undo when next we play. Probably going to be one more encounter. I'm thinking it's going to be one more encounter, the boss of this place, and it's definitely going to be a leader type with minions, as opposed to a solo. They've already fought 2 solos. The tree was a solo, the dragon was a solo. They've done some sort of mixed combats with band and platoon level creatures with minions, and so I think this is going to be a leader with minions. Yeah, I gotta craft that fight, and I think there's a distinct possibility, given the fact that the heroes might not be on full hit points and they don't really have recoveries. There's a distinct possibility that it might not end well for them. It is what it is. If that's the case, then that's the case. We'll see. Maybe there'll be some opportunity when they come through this portal to sneak around a bit and maybe find another health potion or 2 to top them off a bit. I don't know. We'll figure that out. I have a week to sort of play with the scenario a bit, and we'll see what happens. But thank you all for tuning in. Thanks for those of you that have been watching the series and commenting and liking the videos. It's cool to see that even one person has been enjoying it. So thanks again, and we'll see you on the next one. Until then, I almost poked my eye out with the glasses. Until then, I have been Actually JFDM, and we'll catch you next time.